Is this art, or is this destruction? Well, if you ask the Tago who did it, they'll probably say that it's art. But what does the law say? Well, it depends on what you do with the graffiti. Graffiti is defined as the word or design that is marked, written, etched, scratched, painted, or otherwise communicated, either permanently or temporarily on property belonging to another without the express permission of the owner. And in most places, it is considered a misdemeanor, unless it's done on public property, in which case, it's a petty offense. The thing is, though, there are many different types of graffiti, from simple vandalism like drawing dicks in chalk on a neighbor's front door all the way to large-scale murals. And this has led to much debate as to whether or not graffiti should be legalized. Let us take a look at why some people want it illegal, and why others think it should be celebrated. First off, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of graffiti? In the 1970s, the practice was basically limited to tagging trains. The reason for this was pretty simple: to show people where your turf ends and other people's turf begins. You see, when you write your name on something, you're essentially saying, I own this. And that's exactly what those early graffiti artists were doing. They were trying to establish their dominance in the territory. These days, however, things have changed. Graffiti now comes in all shapes and forms and serves all kinds of purposes. Some kids might spray paint a wall because they think it looks cool, while other people use it as a way to make political statements. Some graffiti is even done by professionals. So what's the problem with that? Well, if you're just some kid with no talent and you decide to spray paint a wall, you're going to get arrested. If you're a professional artist, however, you can probably get away with it. In fact, you might even sell your work to the building owner. The reason for this is simple. If you're an amateur with no talent, your graffiti will probably end up looking like this. On the other hand, if you're a professional, your work could end up looking like this. This is why many cities have begun to crack down on graffiti. It's not really about protecting property so much as it is about protecting jobs. After all, when a pro gets hired to paint a mural, that's one less job that someone else could have had. By cracking down on street art, the city ensures that the next Banksy won't come along and steal the jobs of working artists. That's the theory anyway. But if graffiti is just about protecting jobs and nothing more, then how come some places legalize it while others don't? Well, it depends on what the local politicians want. In places like New York City, graffiti is still considered a crime even if you have permission. That SY Lady Pink was arrested back in 1984. She was a famous graffiti artist who had permission from the MTA to paint a subway car. When she was done, however, the MTA decided to prosecute her anyway. This made her realize two things. No, 1. Graffiti wasn't respected in the US, and 2. New York wasn't the place for her. So she moved to Italy where graffiti was legal. While there, she became part of a movement called Legal Up, which fought for the legalization of graffiti. Eventually, they won. And today, graffiti is completely legal in Italy, as long as you get permission first. This is similar to what happened in Australia. Back in 2001, a group of young artists were tired of getting arrested for painting murals. So, they founded an organization called the Australian Street Art Network. They began working with local councils to organize events where graffiti artists could paint legally. This eventually paid off, and in 2014, the New South Wales government passed a law legalizing graffiti as long as it was done with permission. So you might be wondering, what exactly makes one place legalize graffiti while another doesn't? Well, it's basically just politics. Local politicians decide what's best for their community, and sometimes that includes graffiti. But why would they do that? Well, some graffiti actually increases property values. This may sound unbelievable, but it's true. A study conducted in 2013 found that graffiti increased residential property values in low-income neighborhoods. Of course, this only applied to high-quality murals and only if they were done in dangerous neighborhoods. But it was still a game changer. You see, if graffiti can turn a dangerous neighborhood into an attractive one, then it can increase property values. This means the city actually makes more money from taxes, and that's a pretty good argument for legalizing it. But what about the places that don't allow graffiti even if you get permission? Well, there's a simple explanation for that. Places that don't allow graffiti are usually wealthier than the ones that do. This means the property owners need the extra cash from higher tax revenue, and they certainly want their neighborhoods to look run down. If you want proof, just look at Beverly Hills. It's located in one of the richest parts of the US and graffiti is 100% illegal. On the other hand, if you go to East St. Louis, which is one of the poorest cities in America, you'll find tons of graffiti. So, you might be wondering, If legalizing graffiti makes cities more money, why don't they do it everywhere? Well, it's not quite that simple. Just because a piece of art is on a public wall doesn't mean the city automatically owns it. For example, if a private business owner commissions a mural, they might not want it to be legal. For example, let's say some guy named Jeff owns a building. He might not want any graffiti on his property, period. So he puts up a sign saying, "No graffiti." Now, a young graffiti artist named Billy Bob sees the building and thinks it'd be a great place for a mural. He asks Jeff if he can paint a mural on the side of the building, and Jeff says, yes. Billy Bob begins painting the mural, and halfway through, the city passes a law legalizing graffiti. Does that mean Jeff has to let Billy Bob finish the mural? No, it doesn't. You see, the new law says the city supports graffiti, but it doesn't force anyone to let other people paint on their property. This is why there are so many conflicting laws when it comes to graffiti. Each city, state, and country is different, and they all have to take into account private property rights as well as freedom of expression. This is why one mural can be legal while another isn't. It all comes down to who owns the wall and who gave permission to paint on it. But does that mean graffiti is just some sort of gray area? Well, not really. Here's the thing. If you go on someone's private property and paint on it without permission, you're committing trespassing. There's no getting around that. Even if you paint a beautiful masterpiece, you're still breaking the law. The same applies if you paint on someone else's property and they tell you to stop, but you refuse. And that's the real reason why graffiti is illegal. It's not about protecting jobs or increasing taxes. It's about respecting other people's property. Take a second and think about that. If someone came into your house and started painting your walls, you'd probably ask them to leave. And that's exactly what the law is trying to enforce. Now, of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. In most places, you can paint a public wall without permission. However, if the wall belongs to someone, you need to get permission first. The only exception is if the wall is in very poor condition and has been used in a long time. In this case, the city might own the wall and let you paint on it. It's also worth mentioning that you can never paint on someone else's private property if it's in poor condition. So, to answer the question, is graffiti art or destruction? Well, it all depends on what you do. If you paint a piece of public property without permission, you're probably going to get away with it. But if you paint on someone's private property, you're 100% destroying their property, and you will get into trouble. With that said, there are some places where you can paint legally, and others where it's 100% illegal, so be careful and check the local laws before you start painting. Now watch. Should speeding be legal? Or check out. What is the world's strongest glass?